Hi guys, welcome back. It is another absolutely foul day in Northern Ireland, and I got the work I had to do on the car finished on Friday night, so I am just sitting here with a fresh cup of tea and working away on some little bits and bobs in the shed. Now, I have for a while had in mind the building of a very particular model. It's basically going to be made from parts, and as those of you who have been sort of following the channel for a while will know, I have something of a penchant for little overtype engines, the sort of the Mamod Minor and the stationary engine SE1, SE2. I've had in mind for a while to actually build a kind of a custom, slightly larger brother to the SE2. The mission here is to build something kind of unique out of parts that you can pick up on eBay for a couple of quid. You know, really, you're just second-hand parts. Oftentimes old broken models get split and sold as individual components. So all of these parts have been picked up for a few quid on eBay. So I'm just going to push these two out of the way. The donor of preference, it's not this one, don't worry, this one's one that is pending restoration in itself. This actually belongs to my dad. But I'm actually looking to use the boiler, the crank, the flywheel and so on from an early one of these as the donor. So again, push that one out of the way. Do like a Mamod. So what I have done is hooked around on eBay, and for 15 quid, £15, I picked this up. Now, in this case, it's quite handy. It's still got the standard on, the bit that holds the flywheel, which is quite nice. The other thing that's nice about, well, several things that are nice about this one actually, on the exhaust there is a regulator valve, so that means you can kind of slow down the motor, which is nice. On the later ones, there was a forwards and backwards direction changing mechanism. This is quite an early one. This only cost me 15 quid. All of the inserts are in place. Still got the pins. I mean, basically it's ready to plug this up and light a fire under it. So it's covered in some pretty horrible green paint, all blobby, you can see that there. That's going to get stripped off. So for that I should just be using paint and varnish remover. You've seen that process before a few times now. Basically slather the stuff all over it and wrap it in cling film, leave it for a couple of hours, and then later basically just come back and scrape it off. Now this should be inside brass, so it should polish up absolutely gorgeous. The fill port is absolutely fine, no issues there. And at the other end here, that hole is where the exhaust steam comes out. Now again, on the later ones, and I can show you this more easily on a chimney. I actually have a spare chimney in my box of bits, which I'll be raiding in a second. So this is the front end unit from, again, picked up on eBay, but the front end unit from a TE1A, little stationary engine. Sorry, we're talking about a little traction engine. But you can see the chimney's a bit wobbly. But what goes on here, those two holes there are for the two pipes that you see here and here. Now, there are two drilling patterns for these. The position of these holes needs to line up with the position of the holes on the end of the boiler. You can re-drill them, that's just going to get riveted together in the end. I do actually have two spare chimneys. The other one's an even earlier one, which, as I say, you can see the difference in the position of the holes there. I picked these up for a £5 each. They're very, very cheap, but useful things to have around. As you see, this one also has the holes there. But the nice thing about this, apart from the fact that I can just pop it on, rivet it back together, super simple, is that the steam will come out of here and go straight up the chimney. So for a bit of realism, all of the exhaust steam is going to go up the chimney. which is absolutely delightful. Very, very happy with that. So that is the chimney of choice. Now, problem with it, you can see inside there, these things are pushed through straight and then flared out with a special tool. I don't have that special tool, but over the years they kind of work loose. The flaring bends in. So what I'm proposing to do with that is to clamp it in place, make sure it's absolutely solid, and then use some quick steel, which is a two-part epoxy reinforced with steel. Nice and fluid when you first mix it up. With some gloves on, basically smear it in around the edges and pack out what remains of the flare to stop it being wobbly. The stuff's ever so solid once it's cured, and can cope with up to 250 degrees C, so with steam going through it, that should be more than plenty. Right, so we've got the chimney. Let's bring the rest of the box of bits into play. Okay, so I've moved you over to the side there. Just going to have a little bit of a poke through the box to see what we're going to need. So first things first, we're going to need a crank. I usually, for all these models, I have spare parts, sometimes make them, but with some it's just easier to pick them up. So this is the crank that fits in there, thus. Nice and easy. So that's part one, we definitely need one of those. Chimney is already taken care of, that just pops onto the end once it's all been polished down, and will need to be riveted in place through these little holes. What else? We need a cylinder, spring and trunnion pin. Again, if you fix these things regularly, useful things to have in reserve. These just fit through here, and then the cylinders spin on. Of course, this will all need to be polished up, but that should, in principle, it'll need running in, but that should work quite nicely. So there is the cylinder. What else do we need? We need a flywheel. This one's old new stock. I reconditioned this one ages ago actually. It's got a really nice clean wheel, so that's perfect for that. It's one of the type that just pushes on. So that's spot on there. Steam valve. Because it's a Mamod, I'll give it a proper one. This is also going to be used as the fill port, so my other solution involving nuts that could be used to adjust the tension and so on, not so good. This one comes with a knurled texture on it anyway, so it's quite handy. So let's put a steam safety valve and or filler in there. That needs a nice fibre washer on that. And then we need some fill plugs. Now these are ones I've basically machined myself, just knocked up. Always handy to have some around. One is 3/8 of an inch, the other one is 1/4 inch, because the 3/8 for the little fill port here, slightly different size washers, no, thicker washer for the smaller diameter thread. That should go in just nicely. Okay, so I'll sand that washer down so that it ends up like that when it's fully tightened, at least initially. I could use this as just a plug. We could use that as a fill port on the top, that would work. That's a 1/4 inch BSF thread, right? Butterfingers. Or, so that would work as an option on the top, just as a plug. Or I could splash out, I did years ago, pick this up, it needs polishing now. I think I might stick a whistle on there. Yeah, let's go crazy. Always nice to have a whistle. This one's going to be a Christmas present, so I think I'll do it properly. Why not? Okay, so little whistle, make sure that it's not going to scald the person pressing the lever down where the slot comes out the side. So that's all sorted for hardware. Those two little studs there. Ordinarily, those two little studs are to attach into the boiler housing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sort of rhomboidal piece of brass as a stand. My one criticism of this kind of thing is that in order to increase the efficiency by concentrating all the heat underneath the boiler itself with these housings, you can't actually see the flame. I like to see the flame, so I will probably make it a boiler of some description. Probably make it a burner rather. Make it a burner of some description, something similar to that. That's the one I made for Jake's whaler. You'll see the video of that on my channel. So that would have flames at multiple points. I think that'll look quite nice. And then I'm just going to need some kind of stand. It'll just be a piece of threaded bar threaded at both ends, so that it stands on a block at this end, stands on a little, well, effectively a triangle with the top cut off at this end, and is held about 2 inches up so that it's got time for the vapour to burn properly, because if you have the meth's wick too close to the bottom, what happens is it doesn't actually burn, it kind of liquidizes on the bottom of the boiler and then cracks into various different stinking chemicals. They're a horrible smell, so you want to make sure there's enough height there. So that is my plan, basically, to have it suspended like that in the air over some flames that you can see, so that basically it is a super large version of that, effectively, just with the cylinder the other way around. Had this one in mind for a while, as I say, but it's a bit of a Frankenstein's monster. All these bits come from T1As. They've all been recycled and sold on through, stripped down and sold on through eBay. But yeah, I think that'll look quite nice. This is just going to be polished brass, by the way. I'll put that on the polishing wheel, because it's going to be exposed to the flame all the way along. Right, okay, so that's the plan of attack. I'll get on and strip this paint off. As I say, just going to give it a liberal splat of this and then wrap it in cling film, leave it for a few hours. Put that on the polishing wheel. I'm going to avoid taking these solder joints off if I possibly can, and then, short of soldering that onto the top there, this one's going to be mostly bolting bits together. But yeah, there you go, Frankenstein's mammoth. Let's just clean it up, strip it all down, polish it up, and bolt it together. Okay, coming together really nicely here. I am very pleased with how the little receiving piece and legs look on the back there. Very happy with that, particularly the reflection going on in the base plate. I'm really chuffed with that. So all that we need to do now before actually getting this thing fired up is build it a little burner. So I'm going to keep this thing super simple. I'm going to use a piece of brass, which is going to sit under here, remembering that the water in this boiler is only that much. Then there's a compartment at the end that the steam comes down into before going up into the chimney. So this much here is full of water. So I'll just have little burners going on underneath there. I am going to use one of my little pots here. These are for burning chaffing fuel. I'd recommend this actually. It's so much safer than using meths because it can't boil over. It's basically just like hand gel, a slightly more alcoholic hand gel. But a little pot full of that will go nicely, and just to give it a bit of extra volume, they don't have to be filled of course, I'm just going to put another 2 of these on the ends. So it's going to look like that. I am going to solder these onto the bottom. I am going to use silver solder, although it's going to be really low grade silver solder. I'm going to be using audio quality silver solder. Don't need an awful lot of that. That's I think only about 4 or 5% silver, so it's audio grade. It was something like £6 for 5 meters. It's really very inexpensive for what it is, and that's us. So I'll be using regular soldering flux paste to hold that on. Really what I'm going to do here is put a little coil of this silver solder underneath it, position it, get it exactly where I want it, sitting on a fireproof mat of course, and then just heat the tops until the heat transfers down through the solder, melts it into place, and then let it cool. That'll avoid scorching the bottom too much. So let's get on with that. I should mention, by the way, these are standard 28mm end caps. With copper components, you go much over 28mm, things start costing crazy money. But 28mm, I think these work out about £1.30 each, so really not that big a deal. Really quite nice for this purpose. So I'm not going to go crazy here, just a little splat of flux on each one. It's all been cleaned up anyway, so I will need to pick all these afterwards to get rid of that flux. Just going to use a pair of scissors here just to cut a few coils with the solder. We'll know when these have dropped down into place. And the last one's the one with the handle. If you want me to do a video of the fabrication of these, please let me know. It's simple enough, but that's actually brazed on. Now you can do that with silver solder, or I tend to do it with copper braze. You do need some real heat for that job though, so let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that, and I will drop a video up of making those. They're rather lovely little burners for small models just in their own right. Put a bit more in that one. Okay, let's get these organised. first one done. And that's the one in the middle sorted, and now the back one. That'll do nicely. Right, let that cool under its own steam. I'm not going to quench this just yet. I'm just going to give it a little bit of an acid bath to get rid of that flux on there. But that is us. Here she is, guys. That's with the little burner all set up. I've put a couple of foam pads on the bottom of that just so that it doesn't scratch the base and doesn't get vibrated off. I'm kind of chuffed with the fact that it's a little bit too long for my Lazy Susan here, but that'll do for now. Let us get some chaffing fuel into that burner, get her lit. I'll oil her up as well. Of course, as with all of these models, success of the actual running is going to be down to the removal of as much friction as possible. So these washers here and here need a spot of oil. Of course, some oil inside the cylinder, oil on the crank pin. And importantly with these, you push the trunnion bolt forwards and get some oil in behind the cylinder as well, because it wobbles. You want to get as much friction out of that joint as possible. Beyond that, it should just run. They always do. So let's get busy. You may have seen me do this before. What I'm going to do is actually take the cylinder out, sorry, the piston out of the cylinder. Bit of steam oil around the end there. Pop that back in. And just wiggle it around a bit. It's a good tight fit at the end of the cylinder, but as it gets down to the middle, the actual range at which it moves, there is a good bit less. It should sink under its own weight, which it will eventually. There you go. So whilst that's busy sinking, I'm just going to put a spot of oil on the crank pin, a spot of oil on the crankshaft washers. It's the first time it's run here, so this I'll go a little bit over the top, but that's moving nice and freely anyway. As I mentioned, it's going to rock this forwards. Put a good splodge of oil on the back of the cylinder. Now there is a little well in here that you can fill up. Some of the older models actually have a fibre pad in there to hold it, but bearing in mind that this one needs to be run in, we'll just go crazy with the oil and clean up afterwards. So that's that. Of course it has, well, not distilled water. I use either deionised battery water or water from the reservoir in the tumble dryer. I've got a condenser dryer, so that's effectively distilled water anyway. But yeah, the boiler's full of water with no lime scale in it, and very nearly ready to light. Just for those of you who are less familiar with Mamods, they have this rather nice little feature at the back where you've got a fill port. Now, basically with these squeezy bottles, you can squirt the water in, nice tight seal around the end there, and you squirt it in until water comes back out, and that's when you know you've hit the right level. That's us. Now, a lot of the Velasco models and so on have a sight glass. Some of the newer Mamods have a sight glass actually, but this one you could also fill from the steam valve at the top. I'm not going to in this case. So, fuel, as I mentioned, is chaffing fuel. There's a number of different brands available. I would say that the Flamos one is a little bit more expensive, but does seem to burn hotter. And I don't know if that's just my opinion, or whether there's any actual truth in that. Certainly, it does seem to burn a little bit hotter, but it is about 3 times the price. So that was about £4.55, and this was £1.75. So, you know, that burns for 2.5 hours, that burns for 3 hours in the tin. Doesn't really make a massive lot of difference. I'm going to use the Flamos one here anyway. And when you get it out, it's like a pink gel. I'm just going to slap that in there. I'm going to fill all 3 of them up in the first instance. As I say, it's a lot safer than meths because it can't boil over. And what you can do, and I've proven this on other videos, but you can just fill these things with hand gel. Otherwise, it burns pretty hot as well. And of course, now that we are seeing the back of the Rona, there should be something of a stockpile of it in every house looking for an alternative purpose. So, makes excellent fuel for these models. Now I've filled these ones right up. You don't need to put that much in usually, but as I say, this is going to be running hard for the first while, and I want to make sure that the cylinder itself is run in. So we'll get that lit. Get a fresh cup of tea on the go and see what happens. Just turned the lighting down here so that you can see how this burns. Burns with a lovely clean flame, very little soot produced, very, very hot flame. And just like when you're burning meths or any other alcohols really, you can see the blue flame if it's dark. Just be aware that it could be lit and you might not be able to see it. But yeah, there you go. Chaffing fuel, definitely a brilliant source of heat for the steam models. A little bit of a steam leak around the whistle there. Just needs a fresh gasket. A little bit of run out on the flywheel, but forgivable. So there you go, guys. That's it for today. That is a successful outcome, a slightly larger brother to the SE1 and SE2 pulled from the scrap pile. So yeah, very, very happy with how that's turned out, and I have to say, I think the lucky recipient to this one at Christmas is going to be pretty chuffed with it too, so we'll call that a win. If this is your kind of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I do have another couple of boilers in reserve that are going to get a similar but not identical treatment in upcoming videos, so keep an eye out for those. If you click the bell notification, of course, you'll be told when they drop. Yeah, thanks very much for watching. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.